The sun was dipping low over the city as Frank, a seasoned cop with over 20 years on the force, rolled slowly down Elm Street in his patrol car. This part of Boston was usually quiet, with brownstones lined up neatly, immature trees casting long shadows over the pavement. Most evenings passed here without much excitement, and Frank liked it that way. But today, something stood out. He spotted a sleek, black car, definitely not the sort of vehicle you saw every day in this neighborhood, gliding slowly along the curb. For reasons he couldn't quite explain, a feeling of unease crept up on him. Maybe it was the way the car didn't seem in a hurry. Or maybe it was just instinct, the kind of gut feeling that came after so many years patrolling the same streets. Almost without thinking, Frank flicked on the lights and signaled for the driver to pull over. It was muscle memory by now, the way he positioned his car and stepped out, ready for what he thought would be just another quick check. But as he approached the driver's window, he hardly expected what he saw next. Sitting behind the wheel was a black woman, her posture calm, wearing the unmistakable black robe of a judge. She looked him straight in the eye and quietly, with complete confidence, stated her name, Judge Erica Thomas. Frank kept his tone professional, asking for license and registration in the standard way, but something between them felt heavier than a normal interaction. As Judge Erica handed over her driver's license and car papers, her hands were steady. You could tell she had been in situations like this before. There was no sign of fear on her face, just a calm patience, maybe even a silent challenge. She made no sudden moves, didn't argue. Her gaze remained steady, quietly reminding Frank that she knew exactly how these interactions could go. Taking the documents, Frank studied them longer than he really needed to. The name matched. The registration and insurance were flawless. But as he looked down at the paperwork, he knew he was searching for a problem that just wasn't there. His mind kept buzzing with old training, past stories, and a nagging voice that said to look harder. Even though everything made sense on the surface, Frank hesitated. In his gut, it felt like there must be something out of place, something he had missed. Still holding the papers, he looked back at Erica, realizing the tension wasn't just about paperwork. It was about something deeper, something neither of them was naming out loud. Frank finally broke the uneasy quiet, explaining in a careful voice that the reason for stopping Erica was because her car supposedly matched the description of a stolen vehicle. He tried to sound matter-of-fact, but it was obvious he chose his words with caution, maybe even second-guessing himself as he spoke. Erica didn't get angry. Instead, she just raised one eyebrow, a calm and slightly skeptical gesture, as if to say this all could be cleared up with the press of a button. She suggested he call in to the station so they could check the records. Frank nodded, stepping away from the car and speaking into the radio. The dispatcher was quick. After only a minute, the confirmation came back. The car was registered to Judge Erica Thomas. There was no report of it being stolen, and the paperwork was all in order. Even with everything checking out, a weird tension hung in the air. Frank hesitated before handing her back the license, still feeling uneasy for reasons he couldn't quite explain. As the minutes ticked by, a few of the neighbors had started to cluster on their porches and sidewalks. It was easy to sense their eyes on the unfolding scene, their voices in soft whispers, curious why a routine stop was taking so long in their usually quiet Boston neighborhood. The crowd along Elm Street grew little by little, and before long, there were at least a dozen people gathered, phones raised, filming every moment. Some called out softly, asking if everything was all right, while others just watched, waiting. Judge Erica noticed how quickly things were escalating. She sat up a little straighter, taking a steady breath, and raised her voice, not yelling, just speaking clearly enough that her words would carry beyond the car to everyone watching. She introduced herself as Judge Erica Thomas and explained calmly that her car was legally registered and there was no issue according to the records the officer had received. Frank felt a prickly heat crawling up his neck. He could feel the stares, the cameras, the silent questions in the air. Should he wrap this up, apologize, and move on? Or would that look like weakness in front of all these witnesses and phones? For a moment, he stood there silent, caught between his own pride and the growing pressure from the crowd. He knew deep down he was pushing things too far, but it felt impossible to let go. The longer he hesitated, the thicker the tension seemed to become, and the more he questioned how he had ended up here, testing the boundaries of his authority while everyone looked on. Just when it seemed the tension couldn't get any thicker, another squad car pulled up to the curb and Officer Danielle Brooks stepped out. Danielle was well known in the area for keeping her cool during sticky situations, and her sharp eyes took in the whole scene. Judge Erica in her car, Frank looking uncomfortable, and the crowd growing more restless by the second. Spotting Erica, Danielle gave a brief nod of recognition. She had seen her preside over a few court cases, and she immediately understood what could happen if this moment spiraled any further. Danielle moved in closer, speaking in an even, steady voice. She suggested to Frank that everything had been checked, and there was no reason to keep Erica any longer. "We should wrap this up now, for everybody's sake," she said, her words calm but carrying quiet urgency. Frank, however, stayed put, his jaw clenched in frustration. He clung to his original suspicion, even as the sense of a standoff grew. The crowd, meanwhile, shifted and murmured. Some people raised their voices to express support for Erica, calling out that justice should go both ways. Others waited in tense silence, wanting to see who would back down first. The moment felt like it balanced on a wire, ready to tip in any direction. Remaining steady in the face of everything, Judge Erica calmly reached into her bag and pulled out her official court ID. She held it up so both officers and the crowd could see it, her tone never wavering. The gathering of neighbors reacted with a wave of supportive murmurs, some clapping quietly or nodding, as if reassuring her she was not alone. With her badge out in the open, Erica looked directly at Frank, making it clear she had nothing to hide and belonged right where she was. But even with all the proof, Frank just couldn't let go. He started asking Erica about unrelated bits of her past, where she had lived before, why she was driving down the street today, even small details about her job. It was obvious to everyone that these questions weren't really about the car anymore. Erica answered each one without raising her voice, never losing her patience. Still, you could feel the mood shift around them. Frustration and a sense of unfairness settled over the street, weighing down the people watching. Every extra question made the whole thing feel less like a routine traffic stop and more like something bigger, something about trust, power, and how people were seen in their own neighborhood. Suddenly, Judge Erica made a decision. She opened the door and stood up, her movements slow and deliberate, careful not to provoke. She didn't look rattled. In fact, she stood a little taller, squaring her shoulders as she faced Frank, Officer Danielle, and everyone gathered around. The air went completely still. Even the kids who had been whispering in the back fell silent, watching closely. You could almost feel everyone holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. A whole neighborhood drawn into one intense moment. Frank, now feeling the eyes of so many people and the shift of power, stepped up fast. He moved close to Erica, his hand edging unconsciously toward his holster, not quite drawing attention, but not hiding it either. It was a nervous gesture, maybe more out of habit than actual threat. With a quick, sharp voice, Officer Danielle stepped between the two. She spoke directly to Frank, her tone urgent but steady, reminding him and everyone else that things did not need to go any further. She used her presence as a barrier, both physically and emotionally, to lower the heat. The crowd seemed to relax a little, but there was still that heavy sense of waiting, as if everyone was listening for the final word. What happened next set everything off in a flash. Frank reached out and grabbed Erica gently by the wrist, as if to keep control of the situation, but it was the exact wrong move. The second his hand touched her, the whole crowd erupted. People shouted at once. Some yelled for him to let her go, others called out that this wasn't right, and phones shot higher to catch every angle. The street filled with voices, some angry, some scared, all of them demanding respect and fairness. Danielle didn't waste a second. She stepped right in, pushing herself firmly between Frank and Erica, her body language leaving no doubt that the stop had gone too far. She told Frank, loud enough for everyone to hear, that he needed to back away and end the stop immediately. She also addressed the crowd, promising she would sort things out and that Erica was free to go. Frank stood for a moment, his authority slipping away in front of dozens of witnesses. His face went red as he released Erica's wrist and stepped back. Calm but strong, Erica turned to the neighbors and told them she would be filing an official complaint. She urged them not to delete any videos, saying their footage could help make sure something like this did not happen in their community again. After that final intense exchange, there was nowhere left for the scene to go. Erica gave the crowd a last, steady glance, thanking those who spoke up and those who quietly stood by. She got back in her car with steady hands, started the engine, and drove away from the crowd and flashing lights. Nobody said a word as she pulled off. There was a heavy hush, the kind that lingers after something big just happened. Frank stayed frozen on the sidewalk, his shoulders drooping, his face set and pale. He watched Erica disappear down the street, and for a long moment he didn't move. The badge on his chest felt heavier than ever, and he knew there was no easy way to explain away what had just happened. Officer Danielle put some distance between herself and Frank, raking a shaky hand through her hair as she tried to calm herself. The strain of trying to do the right thing in front of so many people was written all over her face. Slowly, the crowd began to break apart. Neighbors talked in low voices or shook their heads as they walked home. It was clear that nobody would forget what happened that day on Elm Street. There was an ache in the air, a sense that some small trust had been broken, and that things might never be quite the same in their neighborhood again. By the next morning, what started on Elm Street had swept across the entire country. News anchors on every major network were replaying the same video over and over. Erica's name popped up everywhere online, threading into conversations about race, police authority, and equality. People all over the United States saw those shaky phone videos and weighed in, seeing pieces of their own towns and fears in what had happened. Hashtags about justice trended high, and for a while it felt like everyone was talking about what it meant. Inside the Baltimore Police Department headquarters, things were tense. Frank was called upstairs early in the day. No real ceremony, just a short call from his supervisor to report for a meeting. You could feel the unease in the hallways. Officers who usually joked with Frank now walked by without a word, glancing at the floor or looking busy. He sat there in a small interview room, trying to hold himself together as he answered questions from investigators and senior officers. It was clear right away that this was not going to blow over quietly. Word had spread way beyond city limits, and now the whole department felt exposed. Everyone knew that, from here on out, the story of one day on Elm Street would stick with all of them. Baltimore police leadership didn't waste time once the media storm hit. They called an emergency press conference and quietly released a statement saying there would be a full internal investigation. Frank was officially placed on administrative leave pending further review, and the news flew through the department. Around the table in the meeting room, nobody spoke above a whisper, afraid to say anything that might be quoted or remembered later. Every question they asked Frank hung in the air, sounding more like a judgment than just a search for the truth. He nodded along, barely saying a word, knowing that every answer might shape what happened next. It was clear this was not going away anytime soon, and the pressure made the room feel smaller by the minute. Meanwhile, Erica was back at home, hoping for a normal day that never came. She tried to focus on small things, making breakfast, sorting her mail, but her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Reporters wanted interviews, local leaders asked for statements, and friends kept sending messages of support. Even so, none of it really shocked her. Erica knew that no matter how high you climbed or how many cases you decided, respect for your title did not always mean people respected you as a person. She just wished she could find a few moments of peace. By evening, a group of neighbors and activists gathered outside the main doors of Baltimore Police Headquarters. There were only a few dozen at first, but they held signs that read, "Accountability for all," and "Justice is for everyone." Someone had blown up a photo of Erica standing tall in her judge's robe, facing Frank during the stop, and taped it right on the metal barriers. Those images shot across social media, turning Erica into a kind of symbol, someone who stood up for herself and for others, even under pressure. People who drove past slowed down to see what was happening, and more joined in as the sun began to set. Inside the building, Frank moved slowly through the locker room, slipping his badge and a few personal things into a brown paper bag. He kept replaying the whole day over and over. It used to feel like just another traffic stop, the kind he had done 100 times before, but now the weight of it pressed down on him. He struggled to put what happened into words that made sense. The guilt gnawed away at him, but at the same time, he felt lost. He wondered if anyone would really understand his side, or if the world had already made up its mind. Danielle found Frank in the back hallway near the lockers, a spot where they used to swap jokes or chat before shifts. This time, her voice was different. There was no small talk, just a quiet determination. She told Frank, straight out, that she was worried, not just about him, but about what the whole mess said about their department and the city. Danielle shared how seeing him act like it was business as usual made her wonder if maybe that was the problem. If treating things as normal was actually ignoring what was broken. Frank didn't argue, and for the first time, he really listened. Danielle asked him if he had ever stopped to see a situation through someone else's eyes, especially people who didn't wear a uniform. She wasn't blaming him for everything, but she wanted him to see that sometimes following your gut wasn't enough, especially when real people and their dignity were standing right in front of you. Frank nodded, the words hitting harder than criticism ever could. After Danielle left, Frank sat alone. He thought about the things his father, also a cop, had taught him about always trusting his instincts. Tonight, that advice felt shallow. He began to realize that maybe what felt right could still cause harm, and maybe that was what needed to change. While Frank sat deep in thought at the station, Erica found herself wandering through her own memories as she sat quietly at home. She remembered the long talks with her father when she was growing up, the kind that happened late at night at their kitchen table in East Baltimore. Her dad had spent 3 decades as a police officer, and he never sugarcoated what the world could be like for a black officer or later, for his daughter as a black woman with a judge's robes. He had always told her, "You'll have to work twice as hard to be taken half as seriously, and sometimes the title on your door won't stop folks from trying to push you aside." Those words had stuck with Erica, and now they echoed louder than ever. She pulled out one of the old family photos from when her dad first wore his badge. Even now, looking at his steady face brought both pride and sadness. Erica let herself feel tired for a moment. Tired of fighting just to stand where she stood, tired of being questioned, even after so many years serving on the bench at the U.S. District Court. Still, those memories didn't make her want to back down. They fueled her. She knew that giving up now would let every struggle her dad faced and every lesson he shared with her go to waste. As the days passed, the incident between Erica and Frank worked its way into nearly every corner of American conversation. It was all anyone discussed in Baltimore and far beyond. In high school classrooms, teachers let students share their thoughts, asking what they would have done in either person's place. At coffee shops in New York, regulars debated whether Frank messed up because of his own choices or if he was acting the way the system had always taught him to act. Some felt it was just one man's mistake, but others saw something deeper, the kind of suspicion and doubt that people outside the expected mold always seemed to face, no matter their job or reputation. The debate only grew hotter, stretching from kitchen tables to city hall meetings. Families argued late into the night, sometimes torn by different generations' memories and expectations. But out of all the arguing, important questions started rising up too. People wondered why, even in 21st century America, a judge in full robes could still feel invisible, and if having the right title would ever really be enough. Others asked who kept the ones in charge honest, and if anybody was ever truly above being questioned. Even those who thought they had all the answers found themselves rethinking what justice and fairness really meant. A few days later, a public hearing was scheduled at Baltimore City Hall, drawing people from across the city. Community leaders, city officials, police department reps, and Erica herself all took their seats at the long table in the main chamber. There were news crews everywhere, wires snaking across the carpet, microphones propped up, and flashes from camera phones each time someone entered the room. The mood was heavy, as if everyone present already knew how important this moment could be, not just for Eric and Frank, but for Baltimore as a whole. Frank came in through a side door, wearing a plain button-down shirt and slacks. No sign of his normal police uniform. He kept his eyes low, aware that nearly every person in the room was watching, some openly judging him and others just curious. Gone were the familiar badges and shields. He felt exposed in a way that no rough night on patrol ever had. Frank realized today there would be no talk about procedure or policy to hide behind. This time, he would have to answer for what he'd done. The silence grew thick as he took his seat, waiting for the questions to start and knowing the city would be listening to every word. As the hearing began, everyone's attention turned to the large screens at the front of the chamber. The video from that afternoon on Fayette Street was played for all to see. The sound filled the room with Frank's voice, the clipped commands, and Erica's calm replies. People focused on every facial movement, the body language, the way things shifted from a routine stop to something much more uneasy. There was a part where Frank's tone lost all warmth, and you could see the tension on Erica's face as she stood her ground. The whole room seemed to hold its breath at those moments, realizing it was more than just a simple public encounter. When the clip ended, the room was so quiet you could almost hear hearts pounding. Standing up, Erica didn't try to defend herself or share excuses. Instead, she spoke in her steady voice, looking around at neighbors, officials, and even Frank. She explained that trust between people and those in power was not built by just following rules or wearing uniforms. Trust had to be earned with real respect and honest responsibility every single day. She pointed out that the bad feeling everyone had wasn't just about her and Frank. This was about the city as a whole. Her words didn't accuse, but pushed everyone present to ask what they expected from each other. Once Erica finished speaking, the committee took only a short break to talk things over behind closed doors. People in the room whispered among themselves, some expecting a harsh punishment, others afraid nothing would really change. The members of the committee came back quickly, faces serious as they gave their decision. Frank would be suspended from the department right away, with pay taken off for a month. He had to complete a mandatory training on bias, something designed to help him see how snap judgments and old habits could hurt the very people he swore to protect. The panel made it clear, if something like this ever happened again, there would be no second chances. The reaction was mixed. Some folks felt the punishment was too soft, saying it was just another slap on the wrist and that the city needed to go further. Others thought the training was fair, a way to give Frank a chance to learn. But for Erica, it was never really about getting back at Frank or seeing one man pay the price. She saw the committee's statement for what it was, an admission that the system itself had failed. As she walked out of City Hall, there was no feeling of victory, just a deep sense that real justice meant going back, again and again, to do the work together. The morning after the hearing, Erica headed back to the courthouse with a heavy head but a steady heart. As she walked through the marble halls, clerks and other judges paused to offer a soft good morning or a lingering handshake, and someone had left a neat stack of letters on her desk. There were emails too, some from strangers as far away as Los Angeles or Chicago, others from friends she had not heard from in years. Mixed among the congratulations and gratitude, one note caught her eye. Staying calm isn't the same as staying silent. The word sat with her all morning. Later, as Erica put on her black robe and entered her courtroom, she let that phrase circle in her mind. The case before her was nothing extraordinary, just a nervous young man facing charges for his first offense. He shifted in his seat, clearly unsure of what to expect. Erica took a moment longer than usual before speaking, wanting to make sure he felt like more than just another name on a docket. Glancing around at the lawyers and the small audience, she reminded herself that what mattered most wasn't the robes or the rituals, but seeing and hearing each person for who they were, no matter how they arrived in her courtroom. When the day finally wrapped up, Erica walked out to the parking lot and slid behind the wheel of her old blue sedan. Just days before, this car had been the center of so much tension, a simple object caught up in the storm of suspicion and misunderstanding. Now, as she sat with her keys in her hands, she could not help but see it differently. The car, once a place where she felt cornered and judged, had become a small symbol of how things could be challenged and maybe even changed. She caught a glimpse of herself in the rearview mirror and realized it was not just reflecting what she had been through. It also showed the quiet hope of what might still be possible, both for herself and for anyone else who felt unseen. Meanwhile, Frank found himself alone at his kitchen table, staring at a blank page. Commanding words always came easily while on patrol, but now, writing a few honest sentences felt impossible. Frank thought back over everything that had happened, letting uncomfortable truths surface. For the first time, he admitted to himself that truly seeing another person was not automatic. It took effort. Ignoring someone, he realized, was the first step towards pretending their pain did not matter. He started to write, breaking the silence inside himself, understanding that real change always comes with a cost, and that even painful words can mean a new beginning.